Let's 3 big deep breaths together. So on your next inhale, take a big deep breath in through your nose. Brief hold at the top and then a big open mouth exhale. Watch your breath go. Good. 2 more. Big deep breath in. Hold at the top. Let something go. Good. One last time. Fill up all the way. Hold at the top. Hold for 3, 2, 1. Let it go. Whenever you're ready, tuck your chin down towards your chest. Then blink your eyes open whenever you're ready. I really like starting that way. Rachel, this is the second time we're doing this.
I get to see you twice, Emily. Twice. Lucky me.
No, like literally could not have been honestly more of a dream. I feel like our first conversation was exactly what it needed to be.
100%.
I obviously want to talk about you and your story and how you got into all of this, because astrology is one of those words that can be very interesting to people. They think they know exactly what astrology is. And the fact that, yes, it's a very esoteric tool, but there's a lot of other words attached with astrology that people kind of immediately think, oh, when you say I'm an astrologer, people automatically put you in a certain box or a certain circle. But when I look at you, I don't immediately see screaming astrologer, because what is astrology?
My favorite way to describe astrology is how one of my colleagues and mentors, Cam White, describes it. Astrology is a time-honoring exercise. Astrology, in and of itself, what it's classified as or how it's viewed today, the pseudoscience, the esoteric art, if you will, is a relatively recent development. Astrology and astronomy were inextricable from each other for millennia, and I'm not exaggerating, actual millennia, until the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. And she outlawed the practice of Western Hellenistic or Western tropical astrology, which I practice, and essentially said, if you're not the monarch, you can't practice this, but you can still do your astronomy, just don't interpret those celestial movements. And so we had the birth of sun sign astrology, of pop astrology. Astrology went underground. A lot of the texts were hidden, burned, etc. But kind of coming back to the very beginnings of astrology, astrology began in a time when history was not recorded, right? So we don't have a lot about the genesis, and astrology gets its pseudoscientific rap because the lore goes that the god Hermes, or Mercury, Hermes Trismegistus, he's the author of the oldest astrological text that we have. So the idea that a god or that a divine source gave astrology to people really serves to discredit its validity or usage in our modern world. However, if you keep time, if you appreciate the 12 hours on your clock, the 12 hours on the clock come from the 12 signs of the zodiac, or the band of constellation that the sun appears to move through vis-a-vis our perspective here on Earth, and the 12 houses, which describe the areas of life in which these themes manifest. So initially, we kept the solar day, and we still do for the most part. We keep the solar year, generally, although timekeeping is its own loaded and political thing, right? The Romans got really involved in redoing the calendar and all that stuff. If you want to know why August is August, there we go. However, we keep more time in astrology because the personality of high noon is different than the personality of midnight, right? And so you can keep lunar time. The month moon was the genesis for that word, month. We can keep Mercury time. We can keep Venus time. We can use the awareness of where everything is in space and how it is both gravitationally and informationally, right? Light is information in the form of photons. And up through Saturn, you can see all these planets. So we literally receive their light visible to the naked eye, and they inform the moment. So the practice of astrology is not only extremely technical, but it is the very origin point of calendrics in general.
And that is what is so fascinating to me, because honestly how I came through this journey of learning astrology was that, it was in the Cosmo, like literally the Cosmo magazine growing up, and like, the pop culture of astrology, and only knowing my sun sign until obviously a few years ago, getting deeper into this tool that is not only something that it has been popularized over the past couple of, I want to say decades, but at the end of the day, this tool has been used for, like you said, millennia, which is wild to me because it's literally what's happening in the sky.
And think of a mathematician, especially one that you learned anything about during your 9th grade geometry class, and that person is an astrologer. We talk about aspects in astrology, right? Trines, sextiles, squares, oppositions. Those have origin in the work of Ptolemy, Ptolemaic aspects. And Ptolemy is also one of the people who figured out insert most of geometry, heliocentric universe, all that stuff, or universe, solar system. Insert that here. And pretty much everybody that you can think of who has contributed significantly to mathematics, Galileo, right? These folks, Copernicus, all astrologers.
Which is wild because the stereotype is so different from, truly what you just communicated. When you start to open yourself up and become a little bit more open-minded than the traditional stereotype of what this tool could be, I feel like this is when it starts to kind of open up your mind to like time, like you said, but like just your life in general and how this tool can really continue to help you on your journey.
And there are many forms of astrology. Most of us know natal astrology, or that's what we're familiar with. My birth chart, the kind of snapshot of the moment in time where I was born vis-a-vis my perspective on Earth. But there are other forms of astrology. Transiting astrology or mundane astrology is like the astro weather. What is the vibe of the time? What things are likely to manifest? In the same way that we use the stars to literally navigate the globe, especially before we had all of these tools. We can use those stars to navigate the inner world and to notice how things might be affected or how we might be affected. There's also electional astrology, choosing auspicious dates. There's horary astrology, which I think a lot of people don't know the name, but this is what they think of. It's predictive astrology.
Okay.
Very uncommon. It's the least commonly used tool.
Interesting.
But it's the one that's the most sort of magical, if you will.
Oh, I love that.
It uses the origin or the moment something came about. So say you have an idea for a business. If you can capture that moment, horary astrology can tell you likely what the outcome of that idea would be. But it's a very, that's one of the more, how do I put this? It's less precise as a tool. A lot more interpretive, kind of like winemaking or cooking, right? It's an art and a science, and you can give someone the same ingredients and they'll bake you a totally different loaf of bread. I mean, we see it on cooking shows all the time. This is what astrology is, hence why pop astrology has such a hold, almost in the same way as pop science.
You know, and funny, kind of going down that rabbit hole, I feel like Gen Z has really stepped into this. Whereas I feel like as millennials, as we kind of grew up, it was something that was still had like a taboo and a stigma with it. But then I feel like over the past couple years, Gen Z has really tried to make this more popular, more just in the everyday culture of things, which I love.
Love it.
But what are the downfalls of that, if any?
You know, as somebody who came out as an astrologer, I mean, I'm the child of two former military officers. My father is a statistics professor and department chair at a university. This is not something I grew up with. And it was nerve-wracking to admit that I was practicing this. And I began to practice after reading the philosopher Plato's last work, Timaeus. If anybody wants to get started, read Timaeus by Plato, another one of those luminaries who contributed deeply to this field. But it was nerve-wracking until recently. So I appreciate them for sort of breaking the barrier. And when you think about it, Gen Z, they are less religious, less dogmatic than the current generations that are still here on Earth. And they're more interested in alternative ways of making meaning of their life. And I mean, what better way to make meaning of your life than honoring your time through the exercise of astrology? I also think for Gen Z, they see the receipts and they're like, these people said that 2020 was going to be insane back before 2019, 2018. And look at that. It was insane. Let's investigate. And I love that for them. I do think, to your point, they have popularized astrology, and always when something is popular, the volume of work, attention, media on it increases. And since the last time we talked, I've come into contact with a PR firm who was looking for a professional astrologer source to write or to contribute to articles in major publications. And I've been contributing. I was able to be published in the New York Post, which was huge. I also had an article in Elle Hungary that was awesome. But they had me in an article as well about the Lionsgate portal. And the first thing I mentioned was how I do not subscribe to the Lionsgate portal. Insert pop astrology here. It is the heliacal rising of Sirius approximately, which floods the Nile, or did in Hellenistic times, and signified certain things for the harvest. But it really doesn't have the meaning people think it does. And love this PR firm. I love this coverage. But they totally just took out the beginning where I said I don't subscribe to Lionsgate, and then I described, but even so, here's some alignments that are happening during this time. If you didn't know better, you'd read this article and think I'm all about Lionsgate. Like, for sure. Pop astrology.
We're here for it, you know?
I'm here for it, but also, please don't take Lionsgate too seriously. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
It's funny because how many astrologers pop on like my Instagram or my TikTok like consistently. And it's very much of like everyone's kind of communicating a very similar story. And it's like, is that the story that is the actual story of what's happening right now? Or is it just we're all going down the same lineage of making sure we get the views?
There is a group, a core of these very academically oriented astrologers, and they founded something a few decades ago called Project Hindsight. And they are all responsible for the recent translation of a lot of these ancient Greek, Roman texts that we now have access to because they've been translated into English. Luckily, there's this core that still exists. They're mostly Gen X. Shout out to all the Gen X astrologers, Chris Brennan, Austin Coppock, one of my teachers. Y'all are phenomenal. They do the Astrology podcast. It is one of the best sources of honest-to-goodness good information. So there's this core, and their opinions, or what they put out, especially with Western tropical astrologers, tends to be seen as like canon or the Bible. And luckily, they're doing excellent astrology. Mm-hmm. I do think people should allow themselves to explore whatever avenues of astrology or whatever aspects of it really speak to them, because you are just as capable of interpreting the facts as anybody, especially given time, dedication, and study. But if you haven't put thousands of hours into this, you are not the same. And I think a lot of people on TikTok, throw up a channel, put out a TikTok, use trending audio, 5.1 seconds, boom, you're a big astrologer. And the algorithm doesn't necessarily prioritize good information, so it can be tricky to navigate.
I totally feel the exact same way how you do about astrology with tarot. And we definitely talked about that the last time we chatted, because these tools, even though they have this esoteric stigma of or dogma of what they should be in the 21st century, it's like at the end of the day, everyone can do this. Everyone can interpret the way that you need to use that tool to the best of your ability. But at the same time, it's also like you have to do the work.
It's a tool if it works for you, but you also have to work with your tool. And so there is an element of having to be trained and practice in order for it to be truly, deeply meaningful. And I really want to encourage people who are interested and who feel a calling to apply themselves and to continue to study. Yes, astrology is basically a different language. I mean, you look at all the glyphs for the planets, for the signs. It can be a lot to take in, a lot to memorize. It's literally like little hieroglyphics, right? But if you put in the time and the energy, it's like practicing an instrument. Then you can play.
I love that. Just like anything.
Just like tarot, right? That symbolism is so ancient. I mean, what is it? The Tarot Ossabuska, the first one, and from Italy all the way back hundreds of years ago. You just have to study, and then you can truly use the tool just like anybody who's ever received it.
So let's say someone's listening to this and they're like, whoa, this is a lot. Where where do I begin?
I feel like everybody, it's like the way you come to the mat in yoga. Everybody comes through a different door and hopefully into the same big room of what leads you in there. Beginning, it's really good to get a basis. And I have some resources on my website. If you go to rachelruthtate.com, I literally have a resources tab. I just redid the website.
Love it.
Mercury, yes, we love a good station direct. Redid it. I think that if you want to start by listening, if you're a podcast person, go for the astrology podcast. If you are a Gen Z person, I totally recommend listening to Cam White. He has a weekly show that's on for free on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts. S.J. Anderson is another great place to start, but listening to people speaking through and applying and interpreting for and with you is really helpful. The best place in my mind, though, bar none, pretend you're listening to nothing. You're like, I don't want to hear other people. Get your own natal chart. Just start reading your chart and get your closest relationships, your primary relationships, get their charts. So your family, your partner, your best friends, and just keeping up with their charts and your chart, you'll start to learn. Typically,
I feel like I hear the standard, okay, what's your sun sign? What's your moon sign? What's your rising? And then it's like, okay, that's all, that's enough. And like, that's a great place to start. But I love talking about the relationships of like, okay, let's start to look at your chart and then start connecting.
Well, if you want to know what a Virgo moon is like, meet Emily. You know, like these things, you can understand them better by seeing lived expressions and examples of them. And so it's important in my mind to pay attention and to be patient. Big 3 is such an improvement over the sun sign. Truly. All astrologers, you can ask any of us. We begin at the beginning, which is the ascendant. The ascendant is the eastern horizon, literally, physically, at your time of birth. And it describes all things that are rising up, being created, being initiated, being born. And it sets up the lay of the land for the rest of the chart. So having a Virgo moon in your 9th house is very different than having a Virgo moon in your 2nd house. Incredibly different manifestations, still the same archetype, just applied to a different. 9th house is about spirituality. It's about higher learning. It's about educational attainment, travel. I mean, a lot of things that you do. If it were in the 2nd house, you'd be a more acquisitive person who was doing all kinds of things with their house and decorating. And maybe you're somebody who organizes people's homes because you're good at organizing stuff. 2nd house is possessions, right? Different manifestations. So I'm glad we have the ascendant in the conversation. But for example, all of you guys out there, if you were born while the sun was above the horizon, so above the ascendant and above the descendant, top half of your chart, the sun is your dominant luminary. If you were born when the sun was below the horizon, the moon is your dominant luminary. So you will identify more and it will be affecting you more. They're both deeply impactful, but one has to be the leader. A lot of people have no idea that their moon could actually be more impactful than their sun.
The way that you speak to that, too, is so easy and like fascinating to me because I've never heard that before. And so I was born at, 3:46 in the morning, something ridiculous. So obviously on a full moon too, when Mercury was in retrograde. So all the things. But so during that time, obviously my moon is going to have more kind of dominance over my sun then as I move through this life.
There's a principle very actually fundamental to astrology, one of the first couple of things you learn, and it's called sect. And sect is, there's the day and the night, so 2 teams, day sect, night sect. Day sect, the dominant planets, the luminary is the sun, and then Jupiter and Saturn, which are our social planets, are the other 2 sort of rulers of the day, if you will, and they're responsible for what we have to do. So during the day, typically we have some obligation, Saturn. We have some purpose in the world. We contribute to our communities, Jupiter. The night sect, when most of us are more liberated, we can do what we want, we're at home. The moon is the dominant luminary, and Venus and Mars are on her night sect team. So Venus is desire, pleasure, beauty. Mars is action, movement, doing. We tend to use those more in the evening. So it's kind of this 2 different teams. They affect us differently depending on when we were born. So you were born in the evening. It makes Saturn, your out of sect malefic, the most challenging planet in your chart. Whereas I was born during the day, which makes my Mars in Pisces the most difficult planet in my chart.
So knowing that I'm a Capricorn rising and Saturn is my dominant ruler from what people have told me.
It's your chart ruler, yes.
Chart ruler. And then that being one of the struggles that I have to move through.
And it's interesting. Difficult doesn't mean bad. If I look at a lot of people who are famous with placements, they've got difficult things going on, but difficult just requires more from you and of you. So you are somebody who is bound by Saturn like it is bound by its own icy rings. You're duty-oriented. You're somebody who's responsible, sometimes even to your own detriment. You know, you'll work really hard and potentially sacrifice things. And it makes it both difficult for you, but it also colors the kind of person that you can be in society. Like, you want a person who will be responsible and show up on time, get you a Cap rising.
I love this because it's so fascinating to me how these small intricacies, even though they're not small, they're huge, they can speak to me so clearly. Like, you just saying that, I'm like, you're describing my life up until this point, which I think is hysterical. And that is so ingrained into my chart.
And what, to me, astrology is the most useful for, especially if you're not going to dive deep into it, if it's not your calling, right? It is useful for giving context, giving permission, and then working with your own way of being in a more neutral way. So it gives us this therapeutic language where we can talk about the difficult Saturn placement instead of like your long-term struggles and issues you personally, you know, difficult moon placement. Let's talk about that instead of like mommy issues, right? It's easier to step back to that 30,000 foot view of things, which gives us more perspective. And that is what astrology is all about. You know, it's sort of promised, right? Mars in Pisces here for me. I'm never going to be the person who is Mars in Virgo or Mars in Capricorn, organized by color, like perfectly boxed. You know, my way of doing things is more free flowing. It is a bit more psychic, more intuitive, more, you want me to be useful? Like, give me a task. You want me to find something that we don't know where it is? I'll go dowsing rod, find it. You just have to then accept it and not fight against it, which is what astrology allows a lot of people to do.
And the word permission, you said that so intentionally, which I love because that's exactly how I speak to the tarot. In that way, these tools give you permission for you to be yourself authentically and honor whatever, like you said, maybe struggles or hardships or moments of time, as I like to call them, seasons of life where we're like, oh my gosh, why is this season so much more difficult? Or why am I really struggling with certain things in the season? Or why is it easier for other people when it's not for me? All those stories that we tell ourselves, not only from childhood and growing up, but also as we go into adulthood, there's so many of us that need that permission to be like, I'm not crazy, or something can affirm me that's outside of me. I understand that. That sounds right. That makes sense. But even though that tool that's outside of you, it's really just a reflection or a mirror of who you really are, to give yourself that permission to say, okay, maybe this season is going to be a little bit more challenging, but for the purpose that I'm going to learn something or I'm going to move through something so that I can step into that version of me that is on the right path. Maybe I took a few steps to the left or to the right when I needed to go straight.
Astrology really does allow us to manage those expectations, especially of ourselves. And like you mentioned, we can compare ourselves to other people. We can see what they have and wish for it or wonder why we don't have it. And then you see what's promised to you in your natal chart. I'm a Leo rising. That makes my 4th house of home and family ruled by Mars and my 7th house of partnership ruled by Aquarius. Home and partnership is never going to be the cutest, sweetest, most lovely, fuzzy thing. And there was a part of me, younger me, especially with my Pisces placement, so romantic, wanted to be swept off my feet. It's like, girl, your life promises you transformation, intensity, mobility, commitment in these sectors of your chart. And so I don't have to expect something else or yearn for or rue that I don't have it, because I understand what is promised to me and how to work within it. And we don't get to have all the things, right? You can't have all the things, but you get a clearer idea. And when you can put words to something, when you can put language to it, often we can apprehend it and get our arms around it and then own it and consciously work through it or with it instead of that confusion of unknowing.
You know what I think is also fascinating too is that I love your story of how you got into this in the first place and kind of mentioning a little bit about your chart. I kind of want to go into that just a little bit to get to like the coming out of the closet in the esoterics world, you know, and it's funny because I feel like since we're in the South, obviously, I feel like we kind of have to speak to it in that way of, you know, I can't, or in some situations, I don't feel comfortable sharing with people that, oh, I'm an intuitive tarot reader.
Yeah.
Because people, once again, will kind of give you the little quirk of the head sometimes, especially here in the South. How did you get to where you are now in using this tool, not only professionally, but how did you find it?
Man, so the whole journey with intuitive arts, and I think it's important that we kind of zoom out even from just astrology and speak to more of that whole, right? 15 years old, mad at the world, living in North Dallas, feeling like I was being stifled by suburbia, came to a yoga mat, never left the yoga mat. So got there at 15 and realized that there was ancient wisdom that made you feel nice and calm and regulated your nervous system and, you know, breath-body connection and all that. I ended up in the world of fitness here in Dallas and then moved out to Los Angeles to pursue management of an Equinox facility in the Marina del Rey area. It's a lot easier to ask these questions or to learn these arts in a place like Los Angeles. Not just because there are 10 million people, but because it's an area where this is much more accepted, popular, standard, mainstream. And so I was able to learn from very high-level professional astrologers. I was working for Sue Schwartz at Unplugged Meditation, doing membership program development for her and managing or coordinating things at the studio. Got to listen to Danny Beinstein, who's a wonderful intuitive astrologer and meditation teacher, go to her classes and realize that she was speaking so to my heart and I wanted to know more. Went into meditation and started teaching that prior to really deep diving into astrology. But I began in about 2016 to listen religiously to the astrology podcast and to be more curious and start reading more books, and started reading that book by Plato, and then literally shamanic journey, which I didn't expect. Became really sick for a couple of nights, that whole sort of in and out of a fever, dream kind of thing. Woke up with a deep understanding of astrology. I ended up using the gift mostly so that I could disprove it. I wasn't ready for that to be something given to me and not in that way. And then ended up studying with Austin Coppock because when I was using it, it kept proving out. Nobody that I came to practice or to speak with discouraged me at all. Being in Los Angeles was helpful for that. It's nice to have a Kundalini awakening in Venice, you know what I mean? It's good. It's easier than if you're like, but I feel all this stuff up my meridian. I'm here in Dallas. They're like, you need to go to a doctor. And then really just dove in head first and studied with Austin during the pandemic after my yoga and meditation studio closed. Continue my studies to this day, underneath Cam White as well. It's something that's a lifelong journey, but definitely coming back to Dallas, I expected much more pushback. I really wasn't public with my astrological practice other than leading full and new moon circles at my yoga studio or trying to test out a little bit of that in the yoga community, which seemed, Vedic astrology is a huge thing as well. The Vedas speak to both yoga and astrology. Anyway, even when I tried to pilot a class in 2018, astrology and meditation, the class never made. I had to take it off of the schedule. But when the pandemic happened, I started doing by donation readings. I didn't think I was far enough along in my studies. Right? You're like years in, you're like, I'm not far enough along. Can't charge money for this. And got so overwhelmed by the number of clients that I had to begin charging and actually make it a real business.
You talking about your yoga studio was like, oh, just the Refuge being like an iconic space in Dallas for so many years. And you're so humble about how you have built such a beautiful community that's just taken over. Even though the physical space is no longer with us, that community still is very strong. You are such a community builder, and you're so good at bringing people together, but also making these tools very approachable and attainable for an online platform as well. With people wanting to come into this kind of new space, into the virtual realm now, how do you handle kind of moving into the next steps? What does that kind of look like for you?
It brings me the most joy to feel the reverberations of the community that the Refuge built. The Refuge built itself. It was an extended ceremony across 3 different spaces, and it lasted the exact length of time it was supposed to. And everybody is supposed to live beyond me in their connections and practice. And I'm so honored by the way that meditation, spiritual practice, pranayama, breath work, everything has expanded so quickly in this area. When we opened, there was not a single meditation class held weekly outside of Buddhist temples. And it just, beyond words, happiness at how many offerings, really wonderful offerings, exist now in this space. When the pandemic happened, we were evicted from our space and the whole thing ended. It was what it was, meant to be this way. I have let that go, right? I was ending a marriage at the time, ending the studio at the time. We experimented with virtual studio. But as a Sun, Mercury in Taurus in the 10th, and there's a nice trine for my Saturn in Capricorn on the 6th, I'm an in-person person. I know I'm an in-person person. However, I have found that one-on-one Zoom calls are about the next best thing to being in person, because it's an attention that's unbroken between 2 points. And for me, that sort of interface is easier than a group. When you're recording, even if there's a live class, right, and it's streaming when you're teaching, you don't see anybody out there. Like, they've all got their cameras off, they're not talking, they're not supposed to, it's not their class. But it's harder to get that feedback than when I'm meeting one-on-one with somebody. I'm so open to new technologies. With Uranus entering Gemini, with Pluto in Aquarius, we know there are going to be some new platforms, new technologies that are supposed to connect people the world over in brand new ways that especially excite change. Astrology, I feel like, is a perfect vehicle for that. I mean, the Zoom realm or, the virtual meetings are a perfect platform for that. But I also am musing of dipping my toe back into the physical space again and opening a studio in Waco, potentially adding some online astrological education. So we'll see.
I love this. This makes
letting it take me, right? Letting the inspiration take you and following that calling.
Well, I'm so excited. I can't wait to see what manifests out of all of these things that are coming.
Everything arises and arrives on time. I have this deep faith and deep belief, and that nothing that is for me will miss me. So being patient with things. I feel as if intuitive practice in general, it is the acknowledgement or the understanding that nothing is random, and thus we can make meaning from all of the different systems that we learn. Anything that we pull, any cards we pull, right, are not random. You can read tea leaves, you can read charts, you can read anything, not random. And so then it's easier to allow space and time for the right things to move in when you understand that they will come if and when they are supposed to.
There is just so much growth that you can have when you dive into these tools, not only personally, but then learning once again how to use these tools to further your life.
Personal development, in my mind, is something that it's another big room where you can come in through so many doors. And whatever door feels open to you, if you're somebody who's looking to tarot, if you're somebody who's looking to astrology, you are looking to self-examine. And to me, that impetus is the most important part. Doesn't matter what you find. If you are really looking to do that self-work, that's all. That's it. That is what is required. That's all.
So for people that are listening, if they are newer to these practices, I don't know about you, but when I work with a lot of clients, it's always career first, then relationship.
Both. Always both.
Always both. So I'm in a season of dating. Now, if you can relate to that, what would I want to look for in my chart? What could I use it for? Like, how could I help support myself in this like chapter or season?
Always, when it comes to dating and relationships, I'm looking at the 5th and I'm looking at the 7th. I'm also, of course, looking at the rulers of the 5th and the 7th. In your case, you just said you're in a season of a lot of dating. You're in the 1 year period, so 1 year in every 12, that Jupiter, the planet of expansion and growth, is moving through your 7th house of partnership. So more dating totally feels right. This is an exalted Jupiter, so you probably are having higher standards than you've had in the past, and somebody who's clearer on what you need. Cancer is about needs, and it's about investment, and it's about the nurturance of a real and authentic relationship, especially one with high EQ. So having Jupiter there, I would see a lot of that. Jupiter going through the 7th is a pretty good indicator of when you're interested in that. Also Saturn going through the 7th. Mars and Venus tend to have shorter cycles. Mars is 1.9 years, Venus less than a year. So those aren't really, yes, when Venus is going through your 7th, like I'm sure your heart's interested in that and that's what you want. Venus is currently going through Cancer, so I want to date, right? But that is less impactful, I would say, because it happens much more regularly. You're in a season of heightened and expanded interest, awareness, and growth in that area. If anyone out in the audience is a Capricorn rising and they also have Jupiter going through their 7th, you're probably in the same boat, or a period of growth within your relationship, maybe taking another step towards some kind of expansion of your family or some sort of expansion of your partnerships. Those 7th house partnerships, though, can be also more than romantic. So I'm imagining that you're building a lot with women and creating and expanding offerings, and especially because Pisces is your 3rd house of communication, this makes sense. You having this, launching the podcast in a larger way and speaking with people, and especially about these more educational topics, and not educational like you're not doing a school podcast, but it's something where you're bringing tools, resources, and information to other people. So those things also make sense. Really cool, too, to check out what's happening in your 5th house. 5th house is about what we do with our joy.
I've never heard it said like that.
It's our creative energy. So we can create with our joy. We can have children with our joy, which are traditionally put in the 5th house, romance with our joy, hobbies with our joy. Where do we put that? Whereas the 11th house is what do we do with our, not me with mine, we with our joy. So the 5th house for you is Taurus, and you're about to get one last pass of Uranus in Taurus, which should, between November of this year and May of next year, it should bring you a little bit more of that change, shift, breakthrough in that 5th house space. So for the last 7 years, you've been going through a Uranus and Taurus transit, probably big changes and shakeups to what you do with your joy, right?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
So I think that would be, in my mind, if I'm doing a reading for you and I'm timing it, right, I would be like, probably since the Jupiter transit's happening and since this Uranus transit's about to happen in this way, between November and May, there'd be some major development. Jupiter exits Cancer next June. So sometime before then, there being a development. If astrology says something once, it says it many times, like tarot. If there's a symbol, there are many symbols. All of the things say the same thing. So clearly you're in a time where that is more activated, but that's where I would look for relationships.
I love
now,
that.
if there's I have a marriage, right, and I'm trying to develop my marriage, then I'm moving toward the 8th house. And I'm like, okay, this is our house of intimacy, our house of co-investment. So negotiating those topics is often what people are doing, a little bit less of that romance thing.
Well, I mean, since we're doing a full-on reading here, no, I'm kidding.
I'm just like, for y'all in the audience, this is just off the dome right here.
I love it. When it comes to dating and relationships, we look at the 7th house, the 5th house, and then you said
the 8th house, this is where we put sex.
Okay.
So 8th house comes in when it's a sexual relationship for sure.
So now let's say coming in to talk about career relationships, if I am wanting to dive into, okay, I'm an solo entrepreneur, or I'm wanting to start a side project, or I want to figure out if there's going to be a change in my career soon. where would I start to look if I were looking at my own chart?
So when clients come in for that, which they do very often, and sometimes it'll be, what should I do or which direction should I go, right? I look at what their career is about. Some people in their career, it's not about money. So I'm not necessarily looking at the money houses only, but always, 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 career and public roles or reputation, what you're known for is your 10th house. That's what it is. So I'm looking for points and planets in the 10th house. I'm looking for, is there midheaven, or the highest point in the sky, the most public point in their chart? Is that in their career? A lot of people have it in the 9th house or the 11th. So they might be more about higher education or spirituality. They might be more about their groups and organizations, or their career might be the central focus. So looking for that, looking for the condition of the ruler of the 10th. So where is it in their chart? Because that house will be tied back to its ruler. So for example, I had a client a couple of days ago, and she was wondering about a career change. So we were going over her career. She has Gemini 10th with midheaven conjunct Mars conjunct Chiron in Gemini. And she is an emergency pulmonologist. Gemini rules the hands, the arms, and the lungs. Chiron is about healing and wounding. And she was getting stressed out by her job. For her, Mars is her hardest planet in her chart as well. So dissect baby. But I'm like, oh, this is both a calling. This is totally, your chart is built for this, built for this. But at the same time, I totally see how you can't do this forever because it's literally stressing you out. And so she's imagining a different career change, but we still want to work within the Mars, Gemini, Chiron 10th because Gemini also rules the vocal cords. So speaking or teaching or, this healing work being in some other avenue, those things, though, do help me to create the personality of what somebody will be known for, could be known for, what fits. And then I'm looking for money specifically in the 2nd house and the 8th. If you get any money, and I don't care what any other astrologer tells you, it will be in your 2nd or 8th house. Either it's your money that you get from something you do by yourself, 2nd house, earned income, or it'll be other people's money, client money, that you get in the 8th house. So I look at who's ruling those houses, which planets are ruling it, and what is their condition. I've had some people who are like, hey, I'm thinking about starting my own business, working only for myself. And you look at their 2nd house and you're like, oh no, baby. No. Like, you've got really strong 8th and 6th house placements. You need to be someone's excellent employee. You need to make sure that you're with people that you can trust, because you're going to have to be with people. But based on different things, I can see if solo is a better vibe, like which one will be more advantageous or easier. And we can kind of go from there. But, if you've got a certain sign up there at the midheaven, or if you've got a certain planet ruling 8th or 2nd house, it will definitely change the way that money comes to you and that career recognition comes to you and what flavors are available to you.
Do you find that fascinating in the years that you've been doing this, how whether aligned people are in their stories or in their dogma lining up like totally exactly to their astrology, but also like how far off people have gotten to then get themselves back?
That's such an interesting question. So I find often the people that are living the most literal astrology are typically the people who prioritize the being of themselves, no matter what that costs, right? Oof. And there are typically things in their charts to say they're going to be this way. But there are sometimes people who I think are so far from what they want or so far from their own relationship with themselves, right? Sometimes we spend so long masking that it's kind of hard to get underneath that mask. The people who are in that situation, though, also in their chart, it's reflected that this is part of their journey. Like, how do you get found before you get lost? So there's a promise with everything. Typically, you can use some timing techniques additionally besides transits. So beyond transits, you have the layer of annual perfections. You have the layer of secondary progressions. There are other layers, right? Solar return charts. You can see all these different timing techniques to get pretty granular, zodiacal releasing. Again, all the timing techniques say the same thing, but we all have dark night of the soul moments, right? And so often people stepping through or into those are the ones asking me exactly the questions that you're talking about.
Wow.
Where it's like, I'm ready for a big change. That's why no one comes to an astrological reading because they're so good. So like, I'm good. Everything's great. Mm-hmm. They come because they want something.
Wow. No, and that's so true to tarot as well. People don't come to me for readings when everything's going well.
Which can be rough. I sometimes feel badly that the economy and my business are almost inverse. Like when times are hard, I have so much business. Mm-hmm. And when times are not hard, I'm like, okay, this June was the best month of the year. And I'm like, it's going to be my worst month of astrology. So I planned to take a vacation. I was like, no, we're not going to push business because it's not going to happen. Everyone's going to be too happy.
What has been the biggest impact that astrology has given you?
I'm going to come back to that word permission. It gives us context upon which to hang our lived experience so that we can make meaning and also understand purpose of all life events. Acceptance, surrender, those words, and also self-knowledge. I mean, the first commandment of the Oracle at Delphi, way long ago, know thyself. Because there's a quote by Plato that's at the bottom of my website, and it's about finding a pattern in the heavens, and for those who have seen it, to see one in themselves. I think that if you're curious about yourself and you'd like to know yourself more deeply, you will find at least some value. You will derive some sort of understanding in taking a glance at your own natal chart. And you can begin from any point that really feels right to you. I'm also going to add, no matter what your religion, belief system, philosophy, dogma, true deep confidence in one's own beliefs also means an openness to interface with and understand or explore other systems because they don't threaten you. So that confidence in your own faith, astrology precludes no faith. It is not about your understanding of the divine. Truly, it's not. It is about understanding that all the things that are manifest in nature, all the pattern in the heavens, all the stars, all the things on the earth, they are of and by the same. And from that place, whatever we choose to call it, like the Tower of Babel will forever fall. It doesn't matter what you call it or how you want to interact with it. This will help you to understand your piece, right? How you fit in the larger framework of everything that is.
Which I feel like is what everyone I know is looking for.
Purpose
and peace. Rachel, thank you.
Emily, thank you so much for having me back. I'm so happy to have been here.
Oh my God, same. I mean, not only once, but twice. But then also I'm like, there's so many directions that we could go in. It is like so hard for me to get myself back on track because my brain is going to all these things. And I'm like, I have so many questions I want to ask you. I mean, I can't wait to have you back on eventually again to go even deeper into astrology.
I'm 90 minutes away, girl. We're good.
I mean, thank God. And like, I can always come to Waco too. So
love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.